investment on innovation to sustain economic growth. We speak with Undersecretary Rosemary Edillo. A wave of dip buying late into the session has erased losses in stocks, with investors awaiting a slew of economic data and corporate earnings to assess the impact of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff war. Nvidia and Amazon were primary drags in the S&P 500 index and also served to keep the Nasdaq in check. And among the magnificent 7 companies, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon are set to report quarterly results this week. One analyst says this is one of the busiest weeks of the year that would keep investors' heads spinning. The Dow ending the session higher by over 0.25%. The S&P 500 up about 0.1, and the Nasdaq falls by 0.1%. 10-year Treasury yields have settled to 4.21%. As for gold, we're seeing gold prices higher at $3,332.50 per troy ounce. U.S. futures pointing to a slight decline when the markets open. Later tonight, Manila time, with the Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all with red arrows pointing to a lower open. As for Asian markets, let's take a look at how they're doing at the get-go this Tuesday. It looks like a mixed session right now, with the ASX 200 up about 0.3, Kospi down about 0.1%, and the Nikkei 225 is shut today for Showa Day. It's a public holiday commemorating the birthday of Emperor Showa. Let's take a quick check at the Philippine markets. Philippine Stock Exchange opens Tuesday higher by about 0.33% at 6,268. PSEI was down yesterday, Monday, by 0.33%. As for the Philippine peso, it opens Tuesday slightly stronger at 56.33 to the dollar. The peso closed yesterday slightly weaker at 56.42 against the greenback. And the prospect of a surge in U.S. tariffs could threaten some Asia-Pacific banking systems, says Fitch Ratings. Let's dive into the details live from Hong Kong with Jonathan Cornish, head of Asia-Pacific Financial Institutions at Fitch Ratings. So good to see you, John. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Cathy.
All right, so we're right in the middle of a pause with a minimum 10% tariff rate in place for all, except for China and the U.S., which have been trading barbed stare of tariffs north of triple digits. So how is all of this impacting the banking systems in the Asia-Pacific region?
Right, so the imposition of tariffs will likely be negative for the region, and potentially more so for the likes of Vietnam and Thailand than is the case for the Philippines, where we view the banking system as exhibiting a degree of resilience and stability in terms of growth prospects. But a pause on implementation certainly leaves some uncertainty there, and that's going to be a deterrent for business investment across the region, and that's going to weigh on economic growth and hit banks' growth prospects, albeit to varying degrees across the region, and it should be largely manageable, especially in the case of the Philippines. That's reflected in Fitch's neutral outlook for the sector, for the Philippine banking system. And that means that we view that the system's prospects for business generation and financial prospects to be broadly similar in 2025 versus last year. We have the same neutral sector outlook on other ASEAN banking systems, except in Vietnam, which is improving, meaning that we expect further improvement this year beyond what occurred last year. But the threat of high tariffs increases the potential that we'll revise the likes of Vietnam's sector outlook back to neutral. Thailand actually could move to deteriorating from neutral, but we see less risk of change for the Philippines overall.
Well, let me pick up on the word you used there, and it's pretty encouraging, resilience. I talked to equity analysts here, and they're all gung-ho over the local bank's profitability and prospects. So from your analysis and putting that layer of, let's say, 17% tariffs, if that goes through, how do Philippine banks compare with various other ASEAN neighbors, considering what they may also see as considering negotiations that are also ongoing as we speak with the U.S.?
Yeah, so the Philippines appears to have one of the lower tariff levels, but what's been flagged by the US administration is still obviously subject to bilateral negotiation. But if the tariff level remains lower, together what is a relatively low single digit exposure to US exports as a percentage of GDP, then the Philippine economy and banking system should remain relatively stable. Again, the most exposed in the ASEAN region are Vietnam and Thailand. Both have high proposed tariff rates, while Vietnam itself exports to the US accounts for around about a quarter of its GDP. So it's also worth noting that the most recent rating actions on the major Philippine banks were upgrades of their viability ratings, and their viability ratings, or VRs, reflect our assessment of their standalone credit profiles. And the credit rating outlook for Philippine banks also remains stable.
And also supportive when it comes to policy, that really plays a key role. So what do you see is the role that the Bangko Sentral will play in Philippine banks' future growth, as well as the most important metric here, the net interest margins?
Yeah, so the authorities in the Philippines, including BSP, certainly have presided over relatively robust credit growth in recent years, and we expect that to continue. There's genuine demand for credit to support robust economic growth, and growth is likely to be aided by policy rate cuts in 2025 and 2026, which is what Fitch expects to be the case anyway. Ordinarily, though, interest rate cuts tend to be negative for bank net interest margins, the NIMs that you referred to. But in the Philippines, rate cuts have not always weighed on bank NIMs in the past. That's partly to do with the nature of bank lending in the Philippines. So the Philippine banks continue to grow their exposure to high yielding loans, which can mitigate pressures from lower policy rates. And that said, we expect NIMs of the major commercial banks to narrow slightly. And the same goes for our measure of bank profitability, which is operating profit to risk-weighted assets. But this is on the back of double-digit total loans growth, which compares very well among large ASEAN banking systems. So overall, bank earnings should really hold up in the Philippines.
All right, well, that's something good to leave with. Thank you so much for joining us, John Cornish of Fitch Ratings in Hong Kong.
Thank you.
And you're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, Malacanang says it is expecting a favorable trade deal as officials head to Washington to negotiate tariffs. And catch our conversation with Department of Economy, Planning and Development Undersecretary Rosemary Edilion. Keep it here on One News. I know that you just came from Cathy Yang. The Malacanang says it expects a favorable trade deal with the U.S. as key officials head to Washington for tariff talks. Trade Secretary Cristina Roque said the goal is to lower the 17% reciprocal tariff on Philippine goods, ideally to zero. Roque is heading to Washington with Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, Frederick Go, to negotiate. She said they will prioritize protecting local industries despite their openness to improve market access for U.S. goods. A lecturer at De La Salle College of St. Benilde says the Philippines can use its upcoming ASEAN chairmanship to gain leverage in the talks. However, Ibon Foundation Executive Director Jose Sunny Africa called the government's offer to further lower tariffs on U.S. goods a quote-unquote capitulation rather than a negotiation, as it could hurt local farmers and manufacturers. In corporate news, Meralco's core net income rose by nearly 11% to over 11 billion pesos in the first quarter, driven by growth in all its business segments. Meralco Chief Finance Officer Betty C. Yap said their first quarter performance reflects a quote-unquote strong start to 2025. Meralco's distribution utility business accounted for the largest share of 60% in its earnings, amounting to over 6 billion pesos. Earlier this month, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos signed a law extending Meralco's franchise for another 25 years. This allows the company to continue operating power distribution systems in Metro Manila and nearby provinces. BDO Unibank's net income rose by over 6% to nearly 20 billion pesos in the first quarter, driven by solid contributions across its core business segment. BDO President and CEO Nestor Tan said the bank sustained its growth momentum from 2024 when its earnings soared to an all-time high of 82 billion pesos. He also said the bank's robust quarterly performance was led by lending activities, with total loans rising 12% year-on-year. While low-cost current and savings account deposits are continuing to grow, Tan said that they still have quote-unquote a long way to go before reaching pre-pandemic levels. Keppel Philippines Holdings is targeting to exit the Philippine Stock Exchange by June 24, ending its almost 4 decades of being a publicly listed firm. Its stockholders approved the move on April 24th, and the delisting petition was filed the next day. CapWealth Inc., which owns nearly 90% of KPH, launched a tender offer at $27.40 per share, running from April 28th to May 27th, with settlement date on June 10th. The stock exchange requires at least 95% ownership for delisting approval. Originally a shipbuilding company, KPH shifted to investment holdings in 1993. For more business stories, visit Business World and the Philippine Star online. The Department of Economy, Planning and Development, formerly NEDA, is championing Filipino innovators in its 3-day annual National Innovation Day celebrations this week. Innovation is a significant driver to sustainable economic growth and development. With us now for more is Undersecretary Rosemary Edelion of DepDev. So good to see you, USEC Rose. Welcome to the program.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having us, Cathy.
Sure. So you're on your second day of the 3-day celebrations, and I know that you've just done your keynote speech. So thank you so much for coming over to do a Zoom Live with us. How's it going so far over there?
Oh, it's going great. Yeah, yesterday we had over almost 300 students coming from 53 different schools from all over the country, and they participated in what we call a design thinking workshop. But this is our Filipino version of a design thinking, which we actually labeled as HABI: Huddle, Analyze, Build, and Innovate. And today we're actually having the pitching competition for the Philippine Innovation Awards, the NCR category.
It's so good to see young people. Really, it's that crowd that you want to attract to participate really in the government's innovation governance ecosystem, if you will. So what sort of innovation is DepDev now asking or hoping to see from fellow Filipinos, whether in government or the private sector, or from both, given what looks to be an era of deglobalization and more of localization, where strong domestic consumer spending is seen as a key to riding out the policy uncertainties we're seeing overseas?
Yeah, that's right. And that's why for this year, we have actually prioritized three major areas. One is on food and agribusiness, of course, because we want to address the issues of food insecurity, and then learning and education, because we know that our learning poverty crisis and all that. And that the third one is on health and well-being, because of course the importance of having healthy citizens.
And I understand that because of that goal you have of focusing on innovation to benefit Filipinos, you're asking from government for a doubling of the innovation fund in 2026. So what do you intend to do with that?
Yes, actually, it's always the case that our innovation programs are oversubscribed. Even just for this National Innovation Day celebration, we always get a very long wait list. And of course, it's always a matter of yeah, having more budget so that we could accommodate more. And also for this Philippine Innovation Awards, so the awards itself will be in October, but this is just the first one, and we already had over 500 registrations and almost 200 completed applications. So it just tells us that that hunger for uh, for for support for Philippine innovation, we call it, is really just upswell. It's really just many, and therefore we hope to be able to meet this growing demand.
Yeah, and that hunger also is applicable to the Global Innovation Index because we want to secure a
right.
higher ranking in that index. The Philippines' latest ranking, up 3 places, pretty good at 56, but that's among 132 economies. And we're intending to place by 43 by 2028.
Yeah, actually for 2024 we ranked 53rd. Yeah, yeah. So and so we want to get to rank 43 by 2028, and then of course placing further up by the end of this NIASD, which is 20 by 2032. Well, first of all, we are of course getting serious about innovation, about promoting awareness first of innovation, and then creating this culture of an innovation, Philippine innovation. And that being the case, we have actually put in place a monitoring and evaluation matrix, which will tell us how we are faring with respect to putting that innovation ecosystem. And these very indicators, many of them are actually also in the Global Innovation Index. And therefore, if we see that we are not performing well with respect to this indices, which is, like I said, which proxies for the innovation ecosystem, the quality. So we will have to ask for support, not just from government, but from our private sector, of course, and from our development partners. And so we are actually very optimistic that we will continue to improve on our rankings.
Yeah, the stakes are really big. We have about a minute. How does it relate to the GDP, though? I mean, if we really do well on innovation, how much of an addition is that to the final GDP?
Yeah, first of all, with respect to the our ranking in the Global Innovation Index, as you know, if you are an investor and a foreign investor at that, then you tend to look at these rankings as a proxy for how good is the quality of the infrastructure, the support of government, and of course the quality of human capital. And so it's also really very important that with innovation, that's where you get new products. That's also where you get new employment. That's how you are able to sustain this growth. If there will always be, new products that are being sold out there, of course, these new products are supposed to make our lives better. But with all this new production, new goods and services, it also comes with the generation of new employment and hopefully the quality employment that we want.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go back to the conference now. Thank you so much for joining us, Yusek Rosemary Edelion of DepDev.
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Exactly 13 days until the 2025 midterm elections. And for the senatorial race, re-election is Senator Bongo and ACT-CIS party list Congressman Erwin Tulfo remains statistically tied at the top. That is according to the latest Tugon ng Masa pre-election survey by Octa Research. They are followed by Ben Tulfo, Tito Soto, Senator Bato de la Rosa, former Senator Ping Lacson, Senators Pia Cayetano, Bong Revilla, Lito Lapid, Makati Mayor Abby Binay, former Senator Bam Aquino, and Las Piñas Representative Camille Villar, who make up the Magic 12. Administration bets still make up most of the so-called winner's circle. Rounding up the top 20 are those with a statistical chance to win include former Senators Manny Pacquiao, Kiko Pangilinan, TV host Willie Revillame, former Interior Secretary Benhur Abalos, Senators Amy Marcos and Francis Tolentino, and actor Philip Salvador. Salvador had the biggest gain, making it to the probable winner slate for the first time. The survey was conducted between April 10 and 16 through face-to-face interviews with 1,200 voters. Meantime, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will land here in the Philippines today, Tuesday, for a two-day official visit. Ishiba and President Bongbong Marcos will hold bilateral talks on how to deepen economic cooperation between Japan and the Philippines. Prime Minister will also discuss strengthening security ties amid tensions in the West Philippine Sea. Ishiba, who is arriving from Vietnam, will attend a wreath-laying ceremony at the Rizal Park before proceeding to the palace for the arrival honors at 4:30 p.m. Coming up after the break, Spain declares a state of emergency amid a massive power outage. This and more from around the globe coming here on Money Talks and One News. It's coming up to 6:54 p.m. local time, just 2 to 3 hours before polls close in Canada. Most precincts in Canada have already closed in an election shaped by Trump, drawing what could be the biggest voter turnout since 1988. Trump has imposed hefty tariffs on Canadian goods and threatened annexing Canada to become America's 51st state, igniting a wave of patriotism among Canadians. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre is seeking to lift the Conservatives out of a minority in a decade. For much of this past year, his premiership was seemingly cast in stone, leading in pre-election polls by over 20 points. Analysts, however, say Poilievre, echoing Trump's populism, is not the right playbook for the moment, possibly hurting his party's chances. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mark Carney is seeking to defend the Liberals' hold in power since 2015. Trump's threats have lifted Carney in the polls, leading by about 4 points against Poilievre. Analysts say the former central banker offers a pair of safe hands amid the Trump-induced turbulence. As of 9:15 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 19 Liberals have been elected and 4 are leading for a total of 23 seats. The Conservatives are elected in 6 seats and leading in 4. Other parties have no seats so far. As of 9:50 p.m. EDT, the Liberals are elected and leading in 80 states, Conservatives in 56, and BQ in 11, and the NDP in 1. The party needs 172 seats to clinch a majority in Canada's House of Commons. The last polls to close are in the British Columbia on the Pacific Coast at 10 a.m. Manila time. That's coming up in about 4 minutes. In Portugal and Spain, power starts to return after outages hit both countries. Extremely rare in Europe, the outages brought much of activities to a halt, stopping public transport and forcing hospitals to suspend routine operations. Portugal already declared an energy crisis, while Spain declared a state of emergency in 5 regions, including Madrid. Both countries are pointing fingers. Portuguese Prime Minister Luis Montenegro suggests the outages originated in Spain, while Spain's grid operator says a connection failure in France triggered a knock-on effect. And in the Vatican, the conclave to elect Pope Francis' successor begins on May 7th. The 135 cardinals eligible to vote will decide the fate of the Catholic Church inside Sistine Chapel, the site of the conclave since 1878. Two-thirds majority is needed to elect a new pope. Up to 4 rounds of voting are held a day. The black smoke billowing from the chapel's chimney signifies a deadlock in voting, while a white smoke means a new pope has been chosen. If there is an impasse after the 33rd round, the 2 leading contenders will face each other in a runoff. Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni says May 7 was chosen to allow more time for preparations. The church is still in a 9-day mourning period for Francis, who died last Monday at 88. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. We're also streamed live on YouTube and on our Facebook channels. Have a great day ahead.